I'm going to do it. Yep, I am. I'm going to do it. Reminding you that I am not a political person. However, we do have an election coming up and it is important to vote. And it is important to vote in line with the Word of God. That being said, I have here in my hot little hand a comparison of the 2024 party platforms. And I'm just going to present it to you. You make your decision based on your belief of what the Bible says. Now, you can download this yourself from frcaction.org. That is frcaction.org. I'm sure there are other platforms out there that will give you a comparison of the party platforms. This is just the one I have in my hand, so let's go for it. The issue of mentioning God. Republicans mention twice, with love for our country, faith in our people, and trust in God's grace. Also, promises to, quote, promote a foreign policy centered on the most essential American interests, starting with the protecting the American homeland, our people, our borders, our great American flag, and our rights under God. The Democrat platform mentions God once. It promises to, quote, remain committed to fighting poverty and enabling all Americans to live up to their God-given potential. Moving on to the issue of life, the Republican platform says it, quote, proudly stands for families and life. It believes, quote, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process, end quote. Again, quote, the states are free to pass laws protecting those rights, unquote, but does not mention the unborn as previous platforms have done. That has upset some people. Believes, quote, the power has been given to the states and to a vote of the people on this issue. Promises to, quote, oppose late-term abortion while supporting mothers and policies that advocate prenatal care, access to birth control, and IVF fertility treatments. So if you've heard that the Republicans, or specifically the Republican candidate for president, opposes helping women in crisis pregnancies, well, that's what the platform says, and he wrote it. All right, again, life from the Democrat point of view. Says it is, quote, committed to restoring the reproductive rights Trump ripped away, unquote. Promises to, quote, pass national legislation to make Roe the law of the land again, unquote, which would allow abortion through birth. Promises to, quote, strengthen access to contraception so every woman who needs it is able to afford it. Protect women's right to access IVF. Repeal the Hyde Amendment. Now, if you don't know what the Hyde Amendment is, it was passed a long time ago, and it prohibited federal funds being used to pay for abortion. Continue to support access to FDA-approved medication abortion. Appoint leaders at the FDA who respect science, and appoint judges who uphold fundamental freedoms. Now, I just want to insert a personal story here. I do know someone who had a chemical abortion, and they did end up in the emergency room twice. They almost died. So chemical abortion is not as safe as you have been led to believe. Back to the platform. Created male and female is the subject. The Republican discussion of multiple policy issues implicitly affirms the biological basis of sex. Pledges to, quote, keep men out of women's sports, ban taxpayer funding for sex change surgeries, and stop taxpayer-funded schools from promoting gender transition, reverse Biden's radical rewrite of Title IX education regulations, and restore protections for women and girls. The Democrats on this subject, they have 2 pages dedicated to supporting LGBT ideology. Promises to, quote, prohibit employment discrimination in the federal government, including contractors, and make federally funded seniors programs LGBTQI+ inclusive, and continue to make great strides in protecting LGBTQI plus children and prospective parents in the adoption and foster care systems. It sounds like they would let LGBTQ people adopt your child. Promises to, quote, vigorously oppose state and federal bans on gender-affirming healthcare. Gender-affirming healthcare, that's for gender dysphoria, for people who can't figure out if they're a boy or girl. Promises to, quote, fight for LGBTQI plus youth and ensure that transgender students are treated fairly and with respect at school. Moving on to the definition of marriage and the role of family. The Republicans say does not include a definition of marriage but affirms the role of the family. Promises to, quote, promote a culture that values the sanctity of marriage, the blessings of childhood, the foundational role of families, and supports working parents and policies that punish families. The Democrats celebrate the signing of the Respect for Marriage Act, enshrining marriage equality in federal law. In other words, not just marriage between a man and a woman, but marriage between whoever wants to marry whoever. And I do mean whoever or whatever. Promises to, quote, pass the Equality Act to codify protections for LGBTQI plus Americans and their families. All right, moving on to restoring education. The Republicans promises, you hear my kitty? I don't even know where he is. All right, Republicans promise to, quote, ensure children are taught fundamentals like reading, history, science, and math, not left-wing propaganda, and defund schools that engage in inappropriate political indoctrination of our children using federal taxpayer dollars, end quote. Promises to, quote, reinstate the 1776 Commission, promote fair and patriotic civics education, and veto efforts to nationalize civics education and support schools that teach Americans founding principles and Western civilization. Promises to, quote, to close the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. and let the states run our educational system as it should be run, unquote. Supports, quote, the restoration of classic liberal arts education. The Democrats on restoring education boasts of efforts to, quote, increase investments, that's code for spending your tax dollars, in full-service community schools, fivefold, providing health care, nutrition, job training, and other wraparound services for kids at school, investing in their futures and making families' lives easier. Promises to, quote, provide free universal preschool for 4-year-olds. Now, just reading through that, shouldn't health care be provided by parents? Shouldn't food be, as much as possible, provided by parents? Now, job training, that's a pretty good idea right there. We need to train our children in high school. We need to teach them crafts, plumbing and carpentry and electricians, auto mechanics. Those need to be taught in school so children they don't have to go to college. So see, there's something good in the Democrat platform. I just didn't want you to think I was prejudiced against it. I got me a new coffee cup. Can't read it. It says hit it in tongues, honey. Got it from Kenneth Copeland Ministries. Okay, back to the platforms. Parental rights in education. The Republican platform says, promises, quote, a plan to cultivate great K-12 schools, ensure safe learning environments free from political meddling, and restore parental rights. Yeah, parental rights have been ripped away in many schools. Don't you like the way my hair is just sticking out back there? Promises to, quote, support schools that focus on excellence and parental rights. Democrat platform promises, quote, to fight for LGBTQI plus youth, unquote, and guarantee that, quote, transgender students are treated fairly and with respect at school. They should be treated fairly. Everybody should be treated fairly at school. Problem is the schools are promoting. They're not just supporting, they're promoting. Okay. Democrats says it, quote, respects the role of parents, families, and doctors, not politicians, in making health care decisions. School choice. Republicans believe families, quote, families should be empowered to choose the best education for their children, unquote, and supports, quote, universal school choice in every state in America, unquote. The Democrat believes, quote, every student deserves a quality education regardless of their parents' zip code or income, end quote. Quote, opposes the use of private school voucher tuition tax credits, opportunity scholarships, and other schemes that divert taxpayer-funded resources away from public education, end quote. Now, I know this is getting long, but I'm still going to throw this in there. I home educated my children. I paid my school taxes, and I paid for the curriculum that I used for my children to have a Christian education. Why did I do that? Because the schools were teaching humanism. You know, it's illegal to have a religion in school. Humanism is a religion. The schools in the state where I lived admitted that they were teaching humanism. I didn't want to teach my children humanism. Therefore, I paid for their education. Was that fair for me as a single income parent to have to pay for my children's education basically twice? I'm paying the public schools and I'm paying for my own kids' education. Well, you can say, well, that's your choice. Okay, I managed to do it, but what about people that were even poorer than I was? What about people that in bad school districts, you know they're out there. What about those people that can't afford to buy the curriculum to homeschool their children? They're paying for public education and not getting it. Okay, enough of that. Homeschooling. Republicans promise to, quote, expand 529 education savings accounts and support homeschooling families equally. Democrat does not specifically mention homeschooling. Guess they don't care. Religious freedom. We're almost to the end. Bear with me. Republican platform calls for the Republican Party, quote, the defender of the First Amendment right to religious liberty, which protects the right not only to worship according to the dictates of conscience, but also in accordance with those beliefs, not just in places of worship, but in everyday life, end quote. Says its party members, quote, include men and women from every faith and tradition, end quote, and that the party, quote, respects the right of every American to follow his or her deeply held beliefs. Supports, quote, a new federal task force on fighting anti-Christian bias that will investigate all forms of illegal discrimination, harassment, and persecution against Christians in America, end quote. Promises, quote, to champion the First Amendment right to pray and read the Bible in school and stand up to those who violate the religious freedoms of American students, end quote. About religious freedom, the Democratic platform promises to, quote, protect the First Amendment right to exercise of religion for everyone, end quote, maintain the separation of church and state. Now, if you have any kind of an education, you know that the separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. Read the First Amendment. Promises to, this is Democrat, promises to, quote, combat hate crimes and white nationalist terrorism, prioritize the investigation of hate crimes against trans and non-binary people, and continue to increase security at houses of worship. Condemns, quote, the decades-long campaign to demonize the Muslim community, end quote, and promises to, quote, advocate for religious freedom across the world, end quote. Now, just a couple of notes there. I've never seen any hate crimes by white nationalists, not saying it's not out there. But investigating hate crimes against trans and non-binary people, well, any crimes against anybody should be investigated. But how about the hate crimes against pro-life centers and the hate crimes against the Jews that's going on right now by people who are pro-Palestinian and pro-Hamas? They want us to not demonize the Muslim community. I guess they've forgotten 9/11, 2001. It wasn't Christians that flew planes into the World Trade Centers, the Pentagon, and the farms in Pennsylvania. It was Muslims. Now, I'm not saying we should demonize Muslims. I'm not saying that. But there are radicalized Muslims that we got to be careful about. Okay, last one. Israel and anti-Semitism. The Republican promises to, quote, stand with Israel and seek peace in the Middle East, condemns anti-Semitism and supports revoking visas of foreign nationals who support terrorism and jihadism, end quote. Promises to, quote, hold accountable those who perpetuate violence against Jewish people, end quote. Democrats support building, quote, a durable peace in the Middle East, bolstered by regional integration, a strong coalition to counter and deter Iran and prevent it and its terrorist proxies from threatening the security of the region, and a negotiated two-state solution. You know, they had a negotiated two-state solution. It was called Israel and Gaza. The Jews were not controlling Gaza up to October 7th of last year. Just saying. Again, Democrats say, quote, the United States supports Israel in the fight against Hamas, unquote, and credits the Biden administration with having, quote, made real progress on a way forward that will free the hostages, establish a durable ceasefire, ease humanitarian suffering in Gaza, and make possible normalization between Israel and key Arab states, together with meaningful progress and a political horizon for the Palestinian people, end quote. For the record, my opinion, look it up, Google it. No, don't Google it, they lie. Palestinians, you see them anywhere before Israel was created? Israel, this teeny tiny state in the Middle East, about the size of New Jersey. Look at a map. And it's surrounded by Muslim countries. Palestinians are Muslims. There's plenty of room. And as for normalization of having good relations over there, 2 words, Abraham Accords. By 1 word, Trump. Okay, this has gotten long, I know. Hope you watched it. Thank you for watching, and next video is going to be about the Bible.